I really do appreciate this, Michael. It's an honor, like I said earlier, to have you here and speak to you, especially about what you have in your book. I told you earlier when we were just getting started, I have a lot of tabs on there of stuff that I actually read and researched. Like I took a lot of what you said and researched a lot of it because I'm very interested in what's human. And in the beginning of the book, you actually use the word anatomically modern humans a lot, and it's just interesting. And I want to know what got you and rest in peace, Richard. What got you too interested in wanting to write this book? Because this is not just some small book. This is a very, very thick book.
Yeah. Well, we were both interested in the Vedic philosophy of India. We were both disciples of the same guru, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And he was very interested in exploring the connections between the ancient wisdom tradition and modern science. So Richard, who was my co-author for Forbidden Archaeology, was a trained scientist. He had a PhD in mathematics from Cornell University, and I was more interested in writing, and being an author and things like that. So we worked together on a smaller project. It was called Origins. It was like a publication, a short publication that dealt with the basic positions that we wanted to take on different scientific questions in the light of this ancient wisdom tradition. So we were looking at the origin of life, the origin of the universe, the origin of consciousness, the origin of species, including the human species and its history. And you learn about that through archaeology. So basically, we decided after that small publication came out to take each part of it and expand it into a book. And we divided it up amongst ourselves. And I was given the archaeology topic to focus on. So I did about 8 years of research. I mean, the basic position that we were looking at is that the ancient Sanskrit writings of India and many other of the world's traditional systems of knowledge speak of a very ancient human presence on this planet.
Mhm.
In other words, human beings have been around for a long, long time. According to modern science, we appear fairly recently on Earth within the past couple 100,000 years. And for millions and billions of years before that, they say, there were no humans like us. So I found when I started looking into this, you don't find any evidence that humans existed millions of years ago in the current textbooks. But I found if I look beyond the textbooks, if I go back to the original scientific reports
Mhm.
by archaeologists and other scientists, I found numerous discoveries, dozens of them, of human bones, human artifacts, human footprints going much further back in time than 200 or 300,000 years. So we kind of collected those uh, accounts and we put them in the book Forbidden Archaeology. And we called it that because we had to wonder if these reports are there in the original scientific literature, then why don't they make it into the textbooks?
Mhm.
So I think it's due to a process of knowledge filtration that operates in the world of science. if you got reports of evidence that go along with the dominant theories, it kind of passes through that filter and people
Hmm.
hear about it and read about it. But if you've got evidence that radically contradicts the dominant theory or paradigm, then it tends to get filtered out.
Right.
So that's kind of how I got into this topic. You know, if I hadn't been exposed to this other knowledge tradition, I probably wouldn't have had any reason to question what my teachers in high school and university were were saying about this question of human origins and antiquity, how long we've been here as a species. But so that's more or less how I got into this.
I wrote my second to my last article based off of what your book is, and it was based off because you talked about the ancient text, how it talks about how there were human-like species in the past, and that was like one of my questions that I actually wrote down. You mentioned like Sasquatch and Yeti and Wildman. My favorite civilization is the Sumerian civilization. I'm not sure if you know about them or not, but they have a story with Epic of Gilgamesh, and it's with Gilgamesh is basically trying to look for a plant or some kind of source to keep him alive forever, and his best friend that's with him was first known as a wild man. He lived in the woods. He ate. He slept. He played with all the animals. He was looked as like an animal, and then later on, you know, a scenario happened, and then he became more human like. And it's interesting you mentioned about a couple of 100,000 years ago about the human-like species. Well, I know the Homo sapiens go back anywhere from 2 to 300 to 400,000 years ago, give or take, just depending on the evidence and the source and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And you do mention the word anatomically human. What is your idea of what a human is? Because I've asked many people this, just not just professionals people, professional people, but just regular ordinary people, and everybody has their own description of what a human is. We know that a human has 2 arms, 2 legs, fingers, toes, head, so on and so forth. We know what it looks like physically because we see them every single day, but we know we're not the first human-like species on planet Earth. We know that. So, and I, from my research, it seems like bipedalism plays a major part on what made us go from um, more animal-like to more human-like.
Yeah. Well, I've got a few things to say about that. One thing is, and this is a broader look at things. When I look at all of the evidence, what I see is coexistence of different types of what what scientists call hominins. In
Mm.
other words, humans and related species. So uh, I see a pattern of coexistence, not that one comes from the other, but just that humans, I use the word anatomically modern humans in forbidden archaeology, as you notice. But I tend to say, in uh, speaking to the general public, humans like us.
Mm.
So that kind of puts it in uh, like a certain way, because if you stick to it just as strictly anatomical, some there's considerable variation among the humans that exist
Mm.
today on this planet. For example, if archaeologists are looking at skulls, they'll say, well, uh, the anatomically modern human skull is smooth here, but if you have the Neanderthals or Homo erectus or some other uh, species that is considered to be ancestral to modern humans, they have big brow ridges, big, thick ridge of bones, either in two parts or just one solid ridge of bone that goes across both eyes. But the thing is, you can find living populations of humans who have that feature also. So, what do you do with them? Do you call them anatomically primitive humans, or you know? So, I've kind of taken an expanded definition of what it means to be human to kind of include within the anatomical definition of uh, humans in
Mm.
terms of classifying them, that it should include all the variation that's there within living populations of human beings today. Of course, we also have, we're coexisting on this planet with different species of apes and monkeys. And there's South American types of primates, monkeys, the African types, uh, Asian types. There are different species of orangutans and gorillas and chimpanzees and all types of we're coexisting with them.
Mm.
And I think we're also coexisting with creatures that kind of match the description of some of the species that scientists see as ancestral to modern humans. You know, like you were mentioning the chapter in the book about Bigfoot, Sasquatch, the
Mm.
Yeti, and all of those creatures. So just as today, humans like us uh, coexist with apes and monkeys, and if these reports are to be taken seriously, which I think they should be, we're also coexisting with what appear to be living ape men, you know, basically, or ape persons, I guess would be a better term. So uh, that's how I see it. A picture of coexistence rather than evolution, and with anatomically modern human being defined in such a way that it doesn't exclude any living humans today from the definition of that species.
Right. Do you believe that some of them can still exist today? Like we mentioned the Yeti and the Sasquatch. Do you think there could be a small group of species that still live like that today?
Yeah. Well, you know, it's kind of interesting. There's a field called cryptozoology
Hmm.
about creatures that appear to exist, but we don't have them in zoos. Nobody's been able to capture one.
Right, right.
And it also is interesting that each year scientists discover thousands of new species.
Hmm.
Now, a lot of them are different species of plants and insects and microbes and things like that. But actually, they discover a dozen or so animals that they either thought were extinct or that had never previously been seen before. So I think, yeah, it is possible we could be sharing this planet with human-like species that we haven't encountered yet. Occasionally, you see in the news reports of you still see, even though we think we've pretty much explored the whole world, occasionally we do run into accounts of lost tribes and things like that that haven't been in contact with uh, civilized, so-called civilized modern human society. But another thing that I try to keep in mind is that, I mean, pretty much we've been talking about creatures with ordinary human abilities, but even ordinary humans possess some types of abilities like remote viewing or telepathic communication or things like that. You know, there are scientists who are studying these things.
Right.
So it may be that some of these creatures, uh, like the Bigfoot and the Sasquatch, are not just possessing the ordinary kinds of abilities and sensory capabilities that we see as normal, but they may have some paranormal abilities as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that may explain how they've been able to coexist with us on this planet without being captured or otherwise uh, put under our subjugation. You know, and this is something that's there in these ancient wisdom traditions. For example, in the ancient Sanskrit writings, they speak about a race of forest dwellers. You were mentioning the Sumerian account of the wild man or forest dwelling creature. Well, similar accounts are found in other traditions, including the Vedic tradition of India, which speaks of Vanaras. That means forest dweller. And they had ape-like bodies, but human-like intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they had language. They had a simple level of material culture, and they, more or less, as you were describing, the associate of Gilgamesh, who was a forest dweller and had a simple level of technology and a certain diet. So, and I would guess, I'm not sure because I haven't studied it to the extent that you have, that such creatures during those times possess powers that go beyond what we consider normal today.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that may be one reason why we don't see one of these creatures in a zoo today, although there are ongoing reports of evidence for them, sightings of them, footprint evidence, other kinds of evidence as well.
I agree. I agree. It's amazing that you said that because this goes into my next question. You mentioned about the intriguing hints of the existence of an advanced civilization, which goes back millions of years ago. And um, what is your idea of what a civilization is? Because I understand what the Oxford University definition is. They have a certain criteria that is needed to be what is considered a civilization. And I go off of their definition only because the Sumerians, they are considered the founders of the first civilization according to Oxford University. And because Oxford University has a lot of their translations and their cuneiform tablets and studies them a lot, I just tend to try to stay with the same realm of where to get my information from, just so that way I can have a basis of what I'm trying to share. So I'm trying to understand from somebody who's not related to the Oxford University at all, what is your idea of
Yes.
what a civilization is based off of what your research showed?
Well, it depends on Yeah, a civilization is generally based on a cosmology, an understanding of what this universe is, what is our place in it, what is the purpose of our life here in this world. And so I think basically it kind of breaks down into two kinds of civilizations or cultures. One is based on dominating, controlling, exploiting the resources of nature in competition with others, individually and collectively, to do the same thing. And civilizations based on principles like that are characterized by uh, uh, extensive ability to exploit the resources of material nature, heavily involved in production and consumption of material things, developing technologies based on the material elements,
Yeah, I love how
and
you say that.
constructing elaborate political, economic, financial, military, religious institutions based on that process of trying to dominate, control, and exploit others, the resources of nature. And you get something pretty much like we have today, where we have a highly developed technological civilization that cannot figure out how to live in peace with each other. And we can't figure out how to not destroy our planet as we exploit its resources. So that's one type of civilization. That's usually what people think of. But there can be civilizations based not on the principle of understanding, controlling, and developing matter,
Mhm.
but there can be civilizations based on knowing, understanding, and developing consciousness, the spiritual side of life. And that means trying to satisfy our material needs in the most simple, natural, fair way possible so that everyone shares in the benefits of it. Don't divide ourselves up into competing groups and get involved in conflict at all levels of human society. And uh, so the consciousness based kind of civilization would probably have a smaller footprint in terms of its impact on the material resources of this planet. But and it, but what it would be doing, it would be preparing, educating the conscious selves, the souls, if you want to use that word. I kind of prefer conscious self because if I say soul, well, people think, well, that's religious, that requires belief. But if I say conscious self, nobody can deny that they're consciousness, that they're a person, they're an individual. I have my consciousness, you have your consciousness. It's different, it's unique. Each one of us is unique. I mean, we have a certain connection on the level of understanding. I'm a being of pure consciousness, you're a being of pure consciousness. So you may have a civilization based on, uh, it'd be a highly advanced civilization, but advanced in terms of its understanding and awareness of our connection with spirit and consciousness and our relationship on that basis rather than our ability to control, dominate, exploit matter, which results in big technology, big architecture, everything big developed in a material sense. So you might have an advanced civilization that doesn't have all that advanced technology, but is focused on simple living, high thinking, basically. So it would be a different kind of civilization.
I like how you put that because that's kind of where the argument is a lot of times. When I have discussions with people about civilizations and stuff like that, the everyone has their own criteria and idea, but the way you put it really does make sense. I mean, if you think about it, you do have many different types of civilizations. You don't have to have one that's technologically advanced like how we are today with Wi-Fi and everything else, because not everybody uses Wi-Fi today around the world, but they are just as civilized and have, the basic lifestyles that we have, and they're happy or probably more than happy than we are with some of the stuff that we have. And I, it's interesting because, like I said, I say it so many times. I always have discussions, and when the word human comes up, it's always discussed as, there's a certain way that people look. We've already discussed that there's many different ways that people look. You got the Homo habilis, you got the Homo erectus, Neanderthals, Homo sapiens, so on and so forth. But I want to go back to bipedalism. Um, when I did my research on what makes us human, I wanted to know what actually makes us an actual human. Like, what is the actual function? What is the criteria? What is the number one thing that you can look at? Because yes, we live among orangutans and gorillas and other monkey type species and stuff like that. And as there was a time when we was covered with hair too, and we eventually lost our hair from, I guess, from what I understand from my studies so far. Um, but when when you say humans, there are a lot of findings that surround the world that has footprints that are in like in stone sometimes, or that's sometimes around do you consider all footprints an indication of a human species that was at that location?
Uh, it depends upon what kind of footprint it is. Yeah, there are varieties of footprints, but if a footprint is there that is of the same type that anthropologists and archaeologists normally attribute
Mm-hmm.
to a human being, I would say it should be taken as evidence for the existence of human beings at that time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you were mentioning, well, what makes someone human? And I think this depends upon understanding that any material body, be that of a human being or a dinosaur or an insect or a fish or a bird, is a vehicle for a conscious self. Like I'm a person and I can ride in different vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
I can ride on a skateboard. I don't really do that, but I could perhaps. And if I'm on a skateboard, I can go so fast. If I get on a bicycle, and especially one assisted by an electric motor or something, you can go a little bit faster. I get in a car, I can go further, I can go faster. I get in an airplane, I can fly in the sky. I get in a boat, I can go across the water. Get in a submarine, I can go under the water. It's just, I'm the same person, but according to the vehicle I'm occupying or riding or driving, I can do certain things. So the human bodily vehicle is special in this sense. It shares a lot of activities with other types of animal bodily vehicles. We eat, we sleep, we mate, we defend ourselves, we do a lot of things that you can also do in another type of bodily vehicle, animal type. But there's something about the human vehicle that allows us to have a conversation like we're having right now. But what is the purpose of life? What is a human being? That requires a special type of vehicle to engage in that sort of conversation and attempt to develop knowledge. And why do we attempt to develop knowledge? Because we want to better ourselves,
Mhm.
better our position in this world. Because if you have knowledge, I mean, I notice your shirt there. You have knowledge. What is the whole
Knowledge,
slogan?
wisdom, and understanding.
Yeah. So knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, we can acquire that in the human bodily vehicle. So I think that's the distinguishing feature of the human bodily vehicle. And we have to ask ourselves, are we using this vehicle, which has these capabilities? Are we actually using the vehicle for its purpose, which I believe is to acquire the things that you've listed on your shirt there? So to me, that's how I would define a human. I mean, the physical features of the vehicle that the conscious self or the soul is using, it does have to be taken care of. Like if you're in a car, you got to give it gas. You got to, to keep it running, you have to do certain things. But as a conscious self, you have a different purpose. You can get out of your car and go to work, or and your work may be as an artist or a podcast host or something else. But your purpose goes beyond the purpose of the vehicle.
That's interesting because that also goes into play with my next what I wanted to talk about with the tools. It's interesting you say that our bodies, our vessels, our avatars, I guess you can say,
Sure.
uh, we the tools that we use that modern or anatomically humans have been using goes back millions of years. You give so much of that evidence throughout the book. I mean, it's the amount of evidence that's in there. I mean, it's ridiculous. Like you said, once if it's written out there, if it's shown, you have to give it some thought. You have to entertain it. You have to acknowledge it. You have to dig deep into it. If you find that it's not worth it, then that's okay. But at the very least, you got to at least you know research the evidence, and you have a lot of that in there. You talk about the flints and stuff like that, and it takes a conscious mind to come up with, hey, this is what I need to do for this certain project, whatever the project is, whether it's hunting, whether it's fixing a tent or fixing a hut, or whatever the case may be. The tool is used to better our lives, and even with today, all the tools that we have today, like I just hit 40 years old just just a few days ago, and I gotta say that when I used to go to the library, I used to have to go and dig through the index cards to figure out what books I wanted or whatever book I wanted to research. But now you can literally just get on there and just type your thoughts in the Google, and it will semi help you find whatever material it is you're looking for. So it does help us with our task and help us better our lives. But our lives back then was more about surviving. It wasn't more because it kind of switched from surviving to an entertainment now. Everybody's living off of being entertained now. And that's why that you have a lot of these TikTok videos and these certain YouTube videos and stuff like that. And it, and I have to ask you from your studies and your background and everything that you've come across even up till today. Uh, what how do you think modern humans came to be? Do you think it was some type of outside element that came and helped us get to the point where we're at today, or was it simply some type of evolution that the strongest survived, the strong the most brightest were able to advance, and so on and so forth?
Well, those are very important questions. And I think people tend to want simple explanations. They
Mm-hmm.
either want a simple Darwinian evolutionary account, or they want a simple creation account. You know, God created us,
Mm-hmm.
Adam and Eve, or some other name for the couple in different languages, or they want a simple extraterrestrial account that there were some extraterrestrial beings who came here and manipulated the genome of some species here and turned it into us. The actual story may be more complex and it may involve all three of those
Mm-hmm.
things. You know, there's a kind of evolution that goes on, but not the type that Darwin talked about, more of an evolution of consciousness. There may be some overall guiding intelligence behind the cosmos. I think there is, and that has a role to play. And then there are extraterrestrial beings, I believe, and they may have something to do with our origins. So it may be a not some simple explanation where it's one or the other, but it may be all of them in a very complex tapestry that's also very beautiful. You
Mm-hmm.
know, sometimes you see tapestries, rugs, or things like that, either from Afghanistan or some other part of the world, that are very beautiful, but very involve very complex patterns of weaving.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe something like that. But again, I go back to the idea that any type of body is a vehicle for a conscious self or a soul, if one prefers that term. And it has a purpose. And I've discussed a little bit what that purpose is. And I think it's something that's always existed. Because if this universe has a purpose, which I believe it does, and that purpose is to give the opportunity for the conscious self in the human form of life to understand its real nature and prepare itself to become elevated to some higher level of reality where the real nature of the conscious self can be fully expressed. Here on this level of reality, consciousness is limited by the vehicles that it occupies. Each one of them is temporary. Like I'm in a human vehicle now, it's been around for 75 years. It's not going to last forever. It, it came into being at a certain point in time, and it's going to go out of existence at a certain point in time. And as a conscious self, I am going to continue in another vehicle. I accept reincarnation. But the whole goal of that process is to elevate consciousness to a level of eternality where it's no longer subjected to being involved in a temporary vehicle that will eventually disintegrate, and you go to another one and another one and another one. You can put a stop to all that. And to me, that means the human form of life, the human vehicle, has been available since the beginning. It's like if we were to make a space station and we send a space station into orbit around the Earth. We don't just hope that, well, maybe some of the chemicals in the space station will combine together and evolve into an astronaut. We make a space station because we've got astronauts. And as soon as the space station is there, the astronauts are there using it for their proper purpose. So I think the human form of life is like that. It's a vehicle with a purpose. The purpose is to enable a conscious self to come to a state of awareness beyond the limitations of the world of matter. And that's its purpose. It's always been there, it's always been available. So, I mean, these ideas are a little bit different than the creationist idea, because I would say the universe, there are many millions of universes, I would say, and they've been involved in cycles of manifestation and unmanifestation, creation and destruction over vast periods of time. But the human vehicle, the plan for that, has always been there in the mind of God. And it's been available through all these millions of cycles of creation and destruction of limited, unlimited numbers of universes. So it was never created. It's always been there and available for conscious selves that want to use it for its proper purpose. So in my book, Human Devolution, I had a chapter on cross-cultural studies of cosmologies. Like you were saying, you've looked at the civilizations of the Indus Valleys, the Sumerians, the Egyptians, perhaps the Incas and the Aztecs and the Mayans in the New World, probably other things you've looked at, and you've noticed some connections among them. And I would say that's because they're all looking at the same spiritual reality from their different points of view. It's as if you were to look at a mountain. Somebody's on the south, somebody's on the east, somebody's on the west, somebody's on the north. Their descriptions are going to be a little bit different, but you'll recognize they're talking about the same thing. You know, maybe from their particular angle, it looks a little different, but basically they're talking about the same thing. They have access to the same reality. And I think that's why they have similarities, even though these cultures or civilizations may be widely separated in time and space.
It's interesting. I never thought about it like that because when you do think about it, when you look at it from that perspective of everybody's in a different position looking at a mountain, they will have a similar idea of what they're looking at. They're just gonna it's gonna be described differently because of their point of view. And that's so when you mention God, so let me ask you, when you mention God, what is your idea? Because I understand the Elohim, I understand the monotheistic and the polytheistic ideas and henotheistic also. But what is your understanding? Like if I ask you, what is your God? How would you be able to describe that to me?
Well, I would say I am a tiny sample of God. I am like a spark from the fire. So the spark isn't the fire in terms of how big it is,
Mm-hmm.
but the spark is of the same quality of the fire. So I would say I'm I can observe myself. I can see that I'm conscious, I'm individual, I'm a person, and whatever my source is, that source is also conscious, individual, and personal. So I would say for me, God is the source of all individual, conscious, personal beings and is in the position of being their source. So I just have to acknowledge that source. And for me, that is God. And to discover, just like with any conscious individual person in contact with another conscious individual person, you try to understand each other and see what your positions are. Just like we're having a conversation, you're a conscious individual person, I'm a conscious individual person. By having this conversation, I'm learning something about you, I'm learning something about myself. So for me, God is another person. The difference between God and me is that God is the source of all individual conscious persons, and nobody else can say that. I can't say I'm the source of all individual conscious persons that I come in contact with. So to understand the real nature of that conscious individual personal source of everything and everyone takes some effort, just like it takes some effort to get to know anyone. So I would say that is my main purpose in life. You could say if that were my goal, I would say it's to understand that original source of everything and be in a proper, harmonious relationship with all other conscious beings and our source. I think that's the key to every problem I may have.
I like how you put that. That helps me with my piece of the puzzle. Um, I really enjoyed your book. I have to say it's an honor to be able to sit here and speak to you because um, when I first got your book, I was shocked about how thick it was. I was like, oh man, I'm over my head with this one. This one's a pretty thick book, and it was so detailed. Like from what I gather, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't see you making absolutes in this book. You're just basically giving people information that is not normally given in a fashion the way that you gave it. And what I mean by that is I can find your information in different places, but to find the amount of information that you have and the quality of it is is amazing because I can see how you came up to um, what is described as an anatomically modern human, how we came to be what we are today. And um, I, I've when I first read this book, I had to slow myself down a little bit and actually go and look for some of the stuff that you wrote about because you would go so deep into what you was trying to say and what you was saying that when I got to the end of it, I was like, man, I wonder if I can find some more information on it. And when I found some more information on it, you actually spoke about it even more later on in the book. You was just like giving bits, you was trying to use, it's like you almost try to find a rhythm to how you wanted to share your knowledge. You just didn't want to, and this is how I felt. You wanted to make it as plain and simple for each and everybody to be able to read the material in your book. Is that was that a chosen reason, like style
Yeah,
that you picked for that for the book?
well, what I tried to do is pretty much what you said. Give people information, give them the pros and the cons. Because you notice as I go through each case, I don't just give the supporters of the
Yeah.
case their point of view. I also give the critics
Yep.
what they have to say about it. And I kind of leave it to the reader to exercise their own intelligence and make their own decision about it. And I think that's something that many readers have appreciated about the book.
Yeah.
So
That's what I did. That's what I appreciated. It's like you was challenging me. You was telling me, "Hey, this is what's out there. Now go see and read for yourself more information about it."
yeah, and it's kind of interesting. You're mentioning the size of the book, 900 pages. Yes, the title is forbidden archaeology, but I thought some people are probably calling it forbidding archaeology because it's just so forbiddingly big. You don't even want to pick it up, you know.
It's a
So
very thick book, and it's very well put together. So
yeah. Uh, well, here's another thing. Richard Thompson and I, we kind of concluded, well, 900 pages is quite a chunk. Maybe we should put out an abridged edition, and we did.
mm,
It's called The Hidden History of the Human Race. It's all the same cases, but just more concisely described. And we thought, well, that book will sell more than the big book, but actually the opposite proved to be true. The big book would sell more than the shorter version of it because it just seems that whoever it is that's interested in this kind of stuff wants every single detail. They don't want anything left out.
that's how I felt. That's
Yeah.
exactly how I feel. I don't want you to leave out any information. If your book got me reading, if I can typically read a 300-400 page book within maybe a few days. It doesn't take me long. Researching that's different because if I find something that I've never learned before, then I'm going to research as much as I possibly can. And you can only but research so much anyway. You can't buy every single book in the world and read it. So you do have to kind of get a quick summary from different places, like using peer-reviewed articles and so on and so forth. And I noticed a lot of your stuff that you have, you got a lot of your information from scientific journals and places like that, and you're literally telling people, hey, this is what's given out there. We should explore this more. And I'm pretty sure you had a lot of criticism from people. Could you tell me one of the one criticism that had you think a little bit about your book a little bit more than normal than what somebody would normally have you doing when they asked you a question?
Well, I I did notice there were different responses. Uh, Basically, I found three different responses from different groups of scientists, archaeologists, and one group I call the fundamentalist materialists. They're kind of committed to the current theories and consensus paradigms and things like that, not really for scientific reasons, but because of some prior commitment they have to materialism or atheism or something like that, where they don't want to bring in anything other than the kinds of things that they're familiar with. And they didn't like my book very much. They didn't like what I had to say. They didn't want to hear it, and they didn't want others to hear it. So that is one kind of reaction. And then, but the world of science is not monolithic totally. There are different groups.
Mm.
There's another group within the world of archaeology and the other sciences that are more or less committed to the current ideas, but not for ideological reasons, for more or less scientific reasons, which means they're willing to listen to alternatives. So I I appreciate them because at least they're willing to listen. And if ideas are going to change, the very first step is, well, people have to be willing to listen to a new idea. And fortunately, some of them are willing to do that. And therefore, I've been able to present papers at major international scientific conferences on this topic, speak at universities, scientific institutions all over the world. Then the third group is those who actually agree with me, who are few in number, but that's kind of what you'd expect. So those are the three reactions. As far as a question or a point that someone raised that got me thinking a little bit is once I was at a meeting of the European Association of Archaeologists, and I presented a paper there about forbidden archaeology. And one of the archaeologists present during the question session after my talk said, uh, and this is in connection with my Vedic inspiration for my work. The ancient Sanskrit writings, the Vedas, speak about a very ancient human presence on this planet going back many, many millions of years. So, and there's some archaeological evidence that's consistent with that, and that's what's in forbidden archaeology. So the question this lady asked me, this is an archaeologist, a woman, she asked, if we were able to convince you that every case that you've mentioned in your book can be explained in terms of the current scientific ideas, what would you do? Would you give up your idea that the Vedas have a correct understanding of human origins? And that made me think a little bit. And I'd think, and my answer was, it wouldn't change my idea because I place the Vedas in a different kind of knowledge system than modern scientific evidence. But so I wouldn't give up the idea that humans have existed for millions of years, but I might start not trying to express that idea among the scientific circles that don't accept the authority of scriptural evidence, like statements from the Vedic text. So, yeah, occasionally I do get a question that causes me to think a little bit about, what I'm doing and why.
I thought about that as you were saying that, and I would think that it would more in how can I say it? verify what's written in the Vedas, because the depending on each individual's idea of what a human is, humans have gone back millions of years ago, just like the Veda text. The way they look, that can be, up into to interpretation, but for the most part, humans do go back millions of years ago. I mean, just thinking about the Australopithecus, ramidus, and Afarensis, even though they were smaller type and species, and they were much hairier than us. But then you have what, the Gigantopithecus, the big old giant looking, almost gorilla type species that was out there. I mean,
Mhm.
we there was there's no doubt in my mind, um, and I don't have a degree in this field or anything like that, but just researching, reading the stuff from the people who have the degrees in this field, the PhDs, the master's degrees, the bachelor's degrees, the people who go to these colleges. I've taken classes from prestigious schools, that's about this stuff, and there is no doubt in my mind that, um, something human-like species, the human-like species, humanity's history goes back millions of years. Now, we talked about anatomically human, and you talked about in your book how that goes back to the Tetractary period. I think that's how you said. I'm not sure if I said that correctly or not.
Yeah, that's kind of it's been superseded in geology, but they used to speak about they would divide the whole geological record into four parts: the primary, the secondary, the tertiary or third, and quaternary or fourth periods. And the quaternary included the time from about uh, 2 million years ago up to the present. And the tertiary went from about 2 million years ago back to the time of the extinction of the
Yeah,
dinosaurs.
65 to 66 million years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the secondary went from the time of the dinosaurs back maybe to the time of the amphibians or something like that, and or the early fish. And the primary was the first epoch on Earth. That's but that terminology has been superseded. I think now they call it the Paleozoic, the Mesozoic, they have modern terms for
Yeah,
this.
they change, they do that a lot. They change a lot. I remember growing up, I remember one way, and when I remember that one way, I can't get past that because that's how I was taught. Then when I know to
Yeah,
learn the new way, it kind of confuses me and I confuse myself. So yeah, I know what you mean. But it's interesting because that, going back to that 66 million to 65 million years ago. So and I don't want to keep you too long because I really do appreciate your time, we've already been going an hour. But I do want to touch up on this. You it's Is it possible? So it is possible that humans walked with dinosaurs then. If we go back to the 65, 66 million years ago of the anatomically human structure body.
yeah. I would say yes. There's evidence that humans existed before the time of the dinosaurs, during the time of the dinosaurs, and of course after. But
Yep.
uh, again, I tend to think of these things. Any type of body is a vehicle for a conscious self, and the type of bodily vehicle that a conscious self gets depends on its what I call karma,
Mm-hmm.
which means what they've done in their past lives that they're going to get the
Mhm.
way they've structured their consciousness, they're going to get a certain type of vehicle. So it would appear that today there's no conscious selves that have the karma for a dinosaur body. I mean, we do have some big dangerous reptiles on this planet, the Komodo
Yeah,
dragons
yeah.
in Indonesia and alligators and crocodiles in the United States. I mean, I remember seeing recently some 18-foot crocodile or alligator that was caught in Georgia somewhere. I used to live in Florida. You had to be careful walking along the shore of a lake.
Yeah.
You might wind up being a crocodile's breakfast. But
Yeah, you're right about that.
yeah, so we kind of share our planet today with big dangerous reptiles, but there were other kinds of big dangerous reptiles in the past.
Yeah, because we're talking at least 6,000 years ago. Uh,
65 million years
well, I'm saying
ago.
6,000 for our first civilization for
Oh, right. Yeah.
when individuals started writing. So
Yeah.
we all we really have right now from that time frame from 66 million years ago to up until 6,000 years ago, all you really have is pictures. And then that's when the writing systems came in, and that's when we started getting, you know, uh, uh, dinosaurs being probably mentioned in the Hebrew Bible. I've had discussions with individuals that talked about how when they talked about the behemoth in the Hebrew text, that sometimes they think that was that was a dinosaur. It's just, they called it different things. You had the dragons. The dragons were probably large reptiles of some sort.
Yeah.
You don't really, one thing that I learned is that these individuals, when they were recording this stuff down in ancient times, they were recording it in the most simplest terms that they had. Today we speak, many different languages, of course, and I'm sure they did the same thing. But in English, we have different, we have a lot of different words for a lot of different things. Like a car can be a car, it can be an automobile, it can be a vehicle. Those three things would tell you that some type of transport vehicle, that's transportation, and it can mean all the same thing. Some people will call a car a truck and truck a car. Some people will say a van was a truck, a crossover is a van, and so on and so forth, because we have different words.
Mhm.
But back then, a chariot was a chariot. If it had four wheels on there and it moved and it did something, that it was considered a chariot. Now when we progressed with language, then it became a royal chariot, and a militarized chariot, and so on and so forth, because of our language. And and I enjoy how you mentioned the Vedas and stuff, because I read the Rig Veda, just a portion of it, because of course they say there's thousands of books of the Vedas out there, and there's no one that actually has read them all, because it's actually, some of it is still needs to be translated. But I
Sure.
do read, I did read the Rig Veda, and the Mahabharata, and some of the other ancient texts from the Indus Valley, and I do get this idea of how it has some similarities with the ancient Hebrew text and the Holy Bible, and how it has similarities with the
Hmm.
ancient Egyptians, and so on and so forth. So there's really nothing really different about it. It's just the wording that plays. And what I learned about wording is your vibration. I know you mentioned a lot about our consciousness. Well, our consciousness, from my understanding of studying chakras and so on and so forth, the Kundalini and stuff like that, I learned that we have a vibrational within us. Our chakras, they play a part with our fine tuning, basically. And I learned that different languages played a different way of how you receive messages, frequency wise. Like if it made you feel better inside, like some people would say in Christianity, they got the Holy Ghost and they start speaking in tongues, and that's their way of having a certain type of reaction to the religion. And I studied a lot about Buddhism. I studied a lot about Hinduism, and I know that there are multiple gods, and I know that there was always, there's always duality, especially in the Vedas, there's duality. You won't know good without bad, and you won't know bad without good. You have to have them both to understand them both. And when it comes to the the human like species, do you think the other human like species, like the Neanderthals, the Homo erectus, and so on and so forth, do you think they died off because of their failure to become more consciously aware than uh, what to the point where we are at today, and that's why we survived and why we did that, or did they evolve and we evolved into the species that we are today because of the breeding that happened between possibly the Neanderthals and the Homo erectus and so on and so forth.
Um, Basically, I see it as evolution of consciousness. In other words, a conscious self may have been in the body of an Australopithecine in one life. And then in the next life, the same conscious self may take birth in the body of another human-like species like Homo erectus. And then from there, go to the next vehicle, Homo sapiens. So it's kind of an evolution of consciousness rather than an evolution of the bodily vehicle, I would say. And the fact that one type of bodily vehicle, human-like bodily vehicle, is present or not present is, if it's not present, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist anymore. It's just that at the present moment, there are no souls that have the karma for that type of body.
Right.
It's like a computer company like Dell or something like that. They have the plans and the parts for all kinds of computers, but they don't make it until there's a customer that orders it. Then they take all the parts, they put it together to give the customer what the customer wants. So if you don't see anybody with a particular model of computer, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Just means nobody's ordering it at the present moment.
Right.
So I tend to see things in terms like that. According to the Vedic literature, there are 400,000 kinds of human-like bodies, and you may not see them all on this planet and with its history, but there are many planets. This is that have life on them, human life. And this is something that's coming into the mainstream fields of astronomy and astrophysics. NASA now has a big program in exobiology or astrobiology, as it's called. And with these new telescopes, they have like the Webb telescope and others that have been in outer space, they've been able to detect Earth-like planets capable of supporting life in solar systems outside our own and other parts of our galaxy. There are actually thousands of them. And some scientists are saying we're probably being surveyed, we're probably being watched by civilizations that may have surpassed our own technologies. We may not be the top dogs in the universe.
I learned that Neanderthals, they in some modern academia, some people, some individuals believe that Neanderthals are the first to practice what would be a religious ritual, and that would be by burying people, putting people in the ground, burying them and stuff like that, because they felt like that they possibly had an idea of afterlife. And we know that the ancient Egyptians had a very um, extensive knowledge on what they thought was on in the afterlife, and we the same thing with the Hindu with the Indus Valley text, the reincarnations and stuff like that, the avatars of the bodies and stuff. So yeah, I really do appreciate your book, and I really appreciate what you and Richard put in this time. I know you mentioned that our bodies are only here for so long, and once it's gone, it goes on. But consciously, the information, the ideas, the stuff that you presented in your book gave me and a lot of researchers. I don't know how many people have you spoken to that actually appreciate your work, because I'm on a journey to figuring out, our ancient history and sharing the information that a lot of people don't get to have or research, because they're so diluted by, a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of misinformation out there. And I know that I know you've had your share of people saying that you're misguiding people and you're not telling the whole truth. But if anybody has actually sat down and read your book, you really do give people wanting both sides of the story, and then you get the third side of the story also. Like, there's always two sides of the story, and then there's the third story, the hidden story within it. And you do that. You actually give what somebody presented, what they feel like is evidence, and then you say, hey, well, this person says this is not actually true because of this evidence that they present. And then you give, well, let's really dig into it. So I really enjoy your book, and I really appreciate that. I'm actually going to go buy your other books now that you mentioned it, because I want to see what you put in those other books. um
Yeah. Well, that's really great.
I am I'm really going to do that. And uh
When I was writing the book, I was hoping there would be some people like you that would really appreciate it and get into it. But I will say one thing is I respect the right of each individual to make up their own mind about it.
mm,
Yeah, if somebody reads the book and decides, well, Michael, it's very interesting, but I'm not persuaded, well, fine, I respect that. What I do have a problem with is if people use government or some other institution to kind of force ideas on people. I
mhm,
don't agree with that. But as far as each individual having the perfect right, which I uh, support, to disagree with me, fine. If that's your individual decision, maybe I've got a little more work to do if I'm going to persuade you, but I respect your decision.
right.
One thing I like to mention, is that my books are available on my website, mcremo.com, and we have some special offers if anybody's interested. If people buy from my website, mcremo.com, mcremo.com, if they get a copy of my latest book, which is called My Science, My Religion, they would have the opportunity to receive, if they wanted, a complimentary free copy of Bhagavad Gita, which is one of the ancient works of Indian philosophy that have very much inspired my work and research. So I'm also going to be appearing to give a talk related to forbidden archaeology at the Stairway to the Stars conference that's going to be held November 10th through 12th at the Luxor Hotel in Las Vegas. So if anybody's from that area wants to come by, that would be great. information about that is on my website in the schedule link. So people can check that out. There's also a website for the event called disclosure best.org. So those are a couple of things that are coming out.
Yeah, I'll make sure I put those out from for the next till you said what till November. So yeah, I'll definitely make sure I put that out.